If you look at my presidency so far, it's a jobs presidency, and it's a small business presidency. While other countries are stumbling out of this pandemic, we're racing ahead. We're in a position to attack inflation from the position of strength, not weakness. And I believe Jay is the right person to see us through and finish that effort.
We are seeing not just the highest inflation in 30 years. Since the president took office, it's actually on par to be the highest inflation in 40 years. And both the president, the speaker, and the Fed has gotten this wrong for most of this year.
Well, President Biden nominating the current Fed chair, Jay Powell, to another 4-year term. Still has to go up to Capitol Hill. But that is not making progressives very happy. That and a number of other developments. Let's bring in our panel. Fox News senior political analyst Britt Hume, Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist, Juan Williams is a Fox News analyst, and Trey Gowdy, former congressman from South Carolina. Britt, some people were surprised that Jay Powell was nominated again, that there might have been this effort to kind of say that that's a Trump-era appointment and move on, but the markets obviously thought it was okay.
Well, I think a lot of people were surprised and perhaps, but probably relieved as well, because with Biden, you don't know what kind of a Lulu he might nominate to an important job like that. And I think a lot of people thought that Jay Powell had done well. He responded promptly and forcefully when the economy started to crater in the COVID shutdowns and the pandemic, flooding the economy with cash. Now, of course, we have a problem, and the problem is inflation, which was a possibly a predictable result of all that, and other policies as well. So he faces a challenge of trying to get inflation under control. And no matter what Biden says about, we're going to attack inflation, when you attack inflation, there's no way to do it when it's a pleasant experience for the economy or the people in it. It never has been. So it's often described as taking the punch bowl away, which is a rather gentle way of saying that you're going to make money tighter, and it's going to be tough for people. So that's the challenge he faces. I suspect he'll be confirmed, Elizabeth Warren notwithstanding.
Trey, putting the Lulus aside, Jay Powell obviously has an uphill battle here, and he's, some people argued that he didn't act because he wanted to keep this job.
Well, Brett, Elizabeth Warren said he was dangerous and a failed leader. So I am struck by how little influence she has within the Democrat Party. I mean, she openly campaigned for him not to get this reappointment, and he is. But there are progressives like Sherrod Brown and others who have spoken highly of him. So given how bad the comptroller of the currency nominee is, and she's not going to make it through, Jay Powell will make it through, and Elizabeth Warren's influence continues to be about the same as the members of your panel tonight.
Juan, what about progressives and where they're feeling? They've obviously handed this bill, Build Back Better, from the House to the Senate, but most, including Ro Khanna, expected to come back in a different version. And some are worried that it's not going to be good enough for them to pass.
Well, I think the news here is a matter of, progression. That what we know is that Speaker Pelosi, President Biden, the majority leader in the Senate, the Democrat Chuck Schumer, have all been in touch as the bill made its way through the House and now comes to the Senate, where Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, those two senators who have had some concerns, are waiting. But it's not going to come to them cold. It'll come to them as a part of this larger ongoing discussion. But, I think it's a very important point to say here that President Biden clearly is no socialist. He's no Bernie Sanders. He's not even Elizabeth Warren calling for more regulation of banks to help consumers, because Jay Powell has been opposed to that. And so what we get here is somebody who is like a mainstream centrist status quo nominee. The markets went up as a result. And I think what you're going to see from Joe Biden going forward, and with Jay Powell's help, is talk about the fact that this administration and this control of the Fed has led to 5 million new jobs, which is a record in this calendar year. He's seen the stock market grow 25% in this year, which is amazing. And we've seen GDP now, the forecast is it's going to be 5.5%, which would be the most since, I think, 84.
Right. And obviously, we also saw inflation in a 31-year high. And there are a lot of people, looking at Joe Biden as a candidate and what he legislatively is pushing, saying that he's far more left than he was on the campaign trail. Speaking of left, here's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman from New York, saying to the New York Times, there's an enormous amount of executive action that they're sitting on that I think is underutilized. On student loans, we've got executive action on the table with respect to climate. There are certainly things that we can do with immigration. Frustration is there, and it's part of why the Progressive Caucus was holding out on passing both of these two pieces of legislation together, because listen, we're not going to take these empty promises anymore. But Ben, either is Joe Manchin as far as what that bill contains.
Well, it seems to me that when you look at the situation that Democrats face right now, they're just in this, ticking clock scenario where you're not going to be able to get anything out of any future Congresses. So you're trying to get as much as you can out of the existing one. It's one of the reasons why the congressional leadership under Nancy Pelosi really didn't care about all these fights over, committee membership and the like. They don't really care what's happening because they're all headed toward the exits. And when it comes to, what's happening under their watch currently, they are really just disconnected from any of the kind of ramifications politically that they could be facing when it comes to the midterms, because they don't really care about it anymore. And this is the downside of the lessons that were learned under the Obamacare experience, where you basically shoved something through that was unpopular without any kind of expectation that you were going to be able to run on it in the future. And I think in this scenario, the same sort of thing is cropping up under the Build Back Better plan and everything that's going to come under it. There is no expectation that you are going to run on this in a way that's going to support your ability to come back to the Congress.
Well, speaking of running on it, Britt, the White House confirming that President Biden is planning on running again in 2024, telling allies that. This as approval ratings are dropping, not only for him, but for Vice President Harris. What do you make of that public declaration now about 2024?
I don't think it's at all clear that he intends to run again, but I do think that as a political matter, you have to say that. Because if you suggest or hint or outright say that you're not going to run again, that makes you instantly a lame duck. And lame duck presidents don't do well. People don't, their influence wanes overnight. So I think this was boilerplate in a sense, but boilerplate that had to be uttered. I think it's a far cry from certain he'll run again, and he'll be in any condition to. In fact, I think the thing we have to watch is the question of whether he serves out his first term. He's clearly deteriorating. He's clearly senile, and his health is, despite his doctor's claims to the contrary, when you're falling down stairs and so on, as he did climbing the stairs to Air Force One, that's worrisome.
Looking live at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. There's an event for military families there ahead of Thanksgiving. Air Force One pulled up to a hangar there, and you see President Biden and meeting the military members at Fort Bragg. Trey, just follow up on what Britt said there about this announcement and the state of the Democratic Party, that it feels, needs to put out that now.
I have no idea about the president's cognitive abilities. That's not my background. He's always had an affected manner of speech for 25 years. So whether he runs, he may not be alone. There are a lot of ambitious young Democrats that didn't think he was going to be the nominee this time, including his vice president, near as I can recall. She ran, although she got the same number of delegates that all of us got. She did run. So whether he runs and whether he's the nominee are two different things.